okay, we have this problem called an evolutionary mismatch. There is a conflict between biology and culture. And what do you want? Okay, you want that it is matched, right? So that it is in harmony with biology and culture. And that's when I came up with the word eustasis. Eu means good, stasis. It's like homeostasis or allostasis is a balance through change. And so you have the good balance through change between biology and culture. So this is what we all want in the future and now, right? Because who doesn't want to have the feeling of this balance between biology and culture, which is also another word of saying doesn't want to be in health and flourish and thrive in a fast changing world?
Tom, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
Thank you very much, Sierra, for having me. I'm doing super fine. Like the weather in Belgium, it's finally springtime is here
Yes.
with lots of sun. So I hope we can transcend that into our podcast today.
Well, I hope so too. You have quite a journey in as a futurist, but also as the osteopath and many other things in your world. Especially want to talk about your journey from we'll call for charcuterie to futurist. So for those that don't know you, like what's been your journey to explore the future?
Where should I start? My journey to futurist thinking started about 25 years ago during a life crisis. I'm trained as a chef. I was used to work in hotels as a waiter because I didn't really like the kitchen as such because it was a very closed environment without seeing too many people. And I'm quite a social person. And then with some traveling around the world, some living in England for a while. I'm from Belgium originally. Then and then coming back when I was about 28, not really knowing what to do next. And a friend of mine had, in the time that I've been away, set up a very successful gourmet deli business, charcuterie shops, and was looking for somebody. And for making a very long story short, which I've written two books about the whole story, but I did that what he what he suggested because he had the success, he had the esteem in the community, he had a beautiful wife, beautiful house, beautiful car, everything, and I had nothing. And myself from what he can, I can started a deli. Like a sort of a franchise from his business. And 2 months later, I was suicidal depressive, like locked in a box, imprisoned into the shop because you couldn't leave. And you had to be there. Even if you didn't have any customers, you just had to stay, right? Because there might be a customer coming. So let's say I was tumbling into this depressive state. And luckily I was talking to this neighbor, which was a pharmacist, about my problems. She was this very open-minded person that I could talk to. I was 29. I had never talked about my problems in my life before, but it was the first time. And she came in with a number, a phone number and a name. She said, "From this person will help you." And, help for me was for desperate people. I had seen what help had done for my mother, who had been gone to a psychologist, psychiatrist. She was sometimes away for a month when I was younger. And, I saw this was, did not result to anything. So, and a month later, I was sitting behind the desks of this therapist, desperate.
Yeah.
And the whole process there was what we call now life coaching, finding out, where are you today? So that's the first question. What are you doing here? And it was not like a nice kind of question. It was like rude, it's like you're a piece of, you know, how to SEHHI and then what the end is. And I felt like aggressed. But it was a very good question because yes, what was I doing there? And suddenly from deep within me came this like of answer says from look, one part of me is going in this kind of anti-clockwise direction and the other going clockwise direction, and these two are like in this harmony. What I'm looking for is harmony, is this in one direction, like these two sides of me that going to their flow. And then she said, "Well, tell me your story." So that was like, okay, telling my story about my past and the difficulties and so forth and the shop. And then she was pointing out to me different elements. Hey, what about this? What about that? And why did you think this? And what did anyway? She very interesting process seeing later in life that how beautiful that was. Then she gave me some questions for homework. When those were discussed, I found out that there was potential in me of being a therapist, a communicator, teacher, researcher, and traveler. What was I doing selling charcuterie and cheese? Well, that was the potential I was born with. But okay, and then the last question, this is the answer to your question, is she said to me, okay, for the next time, I want you to describe an ideal day in 10 years' time.
Mhm. Yeah.
When you're suicidal, depressed, your shop is not going very well. That's like the what question? 10 years
Mhm.
time, I've got problems now. And can't you see that, I'm struggling? Why can't you give me a straight answer? Why do I have to think about something that's so far away when I have so many problems today? But there you go. That was my first introduction to futurist thinking.
So you said that that sentence, it was obviously it's one of the hardest periods of your life, but it turned into a perfect description of your life today. Is there anything you could maybe, do you have that sentence? Do you want to paraphrase? Like, how did it, how did you, let's like, what's that first? And let's kind of talk about how you wrote.
Yeah. So I went home with that and I had full weeks to answer it. And the third week, I said, I better do my homework because she was quite intimidating and I was very intimidated by her. If I didn't do my homework, I'm sure she would slap me around the head or something like that. Or at least it would be a verbal onslaught of not so niceties about my person. I thought, do the homework, Tom, it's easier. And I was thinking, like, now if I'm born and if my potential is being a therapist, a communicator, teacher, researcher, and traveler, if I'm born to that, then I'm made for that. Would my life not become more into a flow? Would my life become more meaningful or more purposeful if I put that into action? And so I imagined what would a life look like in 10 years' time when I have developed this potential. And so I wrote a short story. It's like storytelling about yourself. And then the essence of that story was, well, very simply, I'm a therapist who has developed his own approach, which is research, who has written a book about it, and is asked around the world to give presentations and workshops. So that's the teaching, the communication, and the traveling part. And
And here you are.
here I am. That's my life today.
Well, it's funny that every conversation I've had with, and like the pre-interview call, during the conversations with people, those who are in innovation or in futures, so many people kind of discover it, kind of fall into it. Like you had said to me that you realized it was a discipline in like 2017. Like it was, but you've been doing it your whole life. So that kind of like, I love to talk about that kind of aha, that epiphany, that discovery moment. What did it, was it a relief? Like, how did it feel for you?
Well, yeah, it's like, so I first didn't really realize when I was on a stage in Italy giving a workshop about the reset approach that I had developed. And suddenly it dawned on me, my God, I'm here. I'm doing what I was set out to do. Like, I think it was 13 or 15 years before that. So it was not 10 years. But I thought I must write that down. That's the book I want to write, right? There was a book in me. I'm going to write this down. And then I was started to write the book over a period of time. So from 2015, so ending it in about 2017 towards 18. And in those last months, due to a Facebook post of somebody, I was introduced to a person called Gert Leonard who has written a book about
Yes.
humanity or technology versus humanity, and that inspired me. And then as if I started reading that book, and as if But hang on, what he's saying is what I've been doing on myself all along. This kind of futures thinking, having where are we going, and then deciding where you're going, and then, you know, executing that and letting your future pull you forward. And that was like an epiphany for me from say from wow, well, my God, there is something, there is a discipline that describes what I've been experiencing for that and what I'm trying to write down here in my book. So it was the final. So I had already finished the book and then I added another small chapter to it with my that recent discovery that I also then explained as such. Look what happened to me now. I first started reading this book and look, this is something that is actually exists. And from that moment onwards, that futures thinking foresight became for me something very interesting because I had been living it all along. And it was like the physical proof of that it's not only about the future of technology, of businesses who have a business plan which is future oriented, but that we can use this to manage better this fast changing world, that we have to think about our future instead of always thinking or always dabbling in that past that's pushing us forward into direction unknown, which creates a lot of anxiety about the future because we're not don't know where we are going. But now if you decide from okay, but this is where I want to go, what do I need, what do I want, and you start from there and you come back to today and you let that pull you forward, that's a well, it was a completely different story. For me, anyway, the experience of that is very different.
Yeah, and it's well, the talking about different experiences. I think the one thing that's fascinating about the field is that everyone has such a varied life experiences and what they bring to that. You talked about being a chef and you trained that, like, and then you trained as a therapist. Like that lived experience definitely shaped how you think about the future. So versus like someone who's like maybe purely through academics, like how is that shaped the way you think? Like how is it made you think about the future differently?
Oh, the future is the word thing.
Mhm.
There are many scenarios of the future, but there are things of the future that do not change in all those scenarios. And
Mhm.
what I found about the future is like the past is the past, but the future you create with every choice, decision, and action you make, because that's what I've been experiencing. And so it becomes far more important
Mhm.
than my past. Whatever the past I have experienced, I can change the direction of my future, obviously, because I did it and I gave it a direction. Also, that direction was based on my potential, not on some random elements, which I think is also very important because many people say you can dream it so you can be it. Wait a minute, I don't think that's true.
I can dream of flying. I don't know if I can actually do it. So I have
Exactly. That
does have its limitations.
exactly.
But it is a positive, well, it's a positive thing to not to connect to attach yourself, is it is not to be so cynical or dismissive, but I understand is it's got its uses, right?
But it's got its limitations, and if we take it, if we take it to to these kind of metaphors, and we're going to live by it, we might be at the end of our lives. We might say, what did I do with my life? I lived to this metaphor, and I didn't get anywhere. It's like life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. I'm sorry, but that's the wrong metaphor. I can look up these days what in that box of chocolates, what kind of chocolates are in there, and I can know which one I like and not like, and so I will not be surprised. So, we have to be careful with metaphors that they don't become that the wrong metaphors become the wrong basis of on which we build.
Well, I think one of the things I find fascinating about your work is that the things you've done, right? You things you've done with being a therapist, being a chef, those, and then, when you talk, I want to get into this evolutionary mismatch theory as well as, the hardware and software where the work that you do is very much grounded in the present, right? Present pain that needs to be solved, present issues that you can do kind of futures work, even a chef, it's about the immediate experience, the mindfulness of, especially, high end dining, right? It's like you want people to have this like sensory experience they have to be in the present, which I find so many futurists are obviously more out there for it, but I love that you are looking at this in the present moment. But the one thing that just really kind of, I think people listening to that the work that you're doing is that you told me that most of the colleagues, most of the doctors, they're doing using 19th century, that's the 1800s folks, um, designed for those 19th century problems. Let's talk about that. I'm gonna stop there and let you kind of take the
Okay, okay.
over back.
Yeah, because we had a
This is
discussion.
because you're like you'll listen to it, you're like, oh my, you're totally right. Yeah.
Yeah, wait, because in the discussion we had before, so I'm an osteopath, specialized in stress-related ailments, being it physical, mental, especially now with the chronic diseases that have been established to what's called dysautonomia, including like long COVID and so forth, and that these are dysfunctions of our autonomic systems. So, but if you look at what autonomic systems are, so you have, for example, the autonomic nervous system, the neuroendocrine, and so forth. This is part of what I call our software. So this is what is directing muscles, the heart, the digestion, the immune, the inflammatory, the way you think, the way you look ahead, or your capacity to futures thinking, for example. All of that is basically regulated by autonomic systems in our body. So I call this the software of our body. But if you really look at manual therapy today and the training we get is based on developments from the 19th and early 20s, developed for problems of their time, where the problems were not so much on the software part, but more on the hardware. There was physical labor. We had physical active lives. So that the impact of that physical life was also physical trauma or wear and tear, which is directly on the musculoskeletal elements, for example, on the arm, on the back, on the neck. Yes, so the biomechanical parts. So the 19th and 20th century was basically strewn with biomechanical problems, musculoskeletal disorders due to physical trauma. Today, we find ourselves with musculoskeletal conditions. And if I ask my patients, what happened? Nothing. I don't know. I just woke up with it, right? And this woke up with it, I know from experience. Now I've been doing this for 19 years, so it's not from yesterday. That means that probably that body was so stressed, chronically stressed from something that has happened months ago, or an accumulation of things that have happened over time, where the body's regulatory system, so this software, has become dysfunctional, and so the tension stays, and the incremental. So tension starts, and they will say, "Oh, it will get better tomorrow," but it doesn't get better tomorrow. Actually, you get used to the pain or used to the tension, but the next thing arrives, and then more tension builds up and more tensions until the body is so overcompensated that you turn in your bed and then you're blocked. It's not the mattress, it's not the pillow. Is that chronic stress has put you into an overcompensated state that one movement, a small movement, can make the difference into relaxation. You, ow, I'm blocked. And it can be also when you wake up, you pick up your towel in the bathroom and you're stuck, or you're doing your shoelaces on. It can be as simple as that. Here, we cannot treat this with a hardware solution, because the cause is not the hardware, so it's not a biomechanical physical trauma, it's stress. So it's like a switchboard, no, like, how do you call it, like, in your house you have electrical circuit boards, right? And the circuit has sprung.
It's yeah, the circuit board. It's yeah,
Circuit board.
yeah. I mean, it's this fuse. It's the fuse box. Yeah,
Fuse box.
which
Okay, a fuse has sprung.
Yeah, trips. The fuse trips, shuts itself off, switches over, and you have to go and manually cut it over if you have to. But
Yeah, and you
it prevents a cascading failure. It also isolates the problem and shuts it down. That's the function.
Yeah. And so you can, if you say biomechanically, I'm going to switch that switch back on again, and you do that, but it doesn't work because somewhere there is an overcurrent happened. So you need to treat the overcurrent, which is in the body, it's like the overcurrent comes from this software problem.
Well, and this relates to what you also talked about, evolutionary mismatch, right? Before we did, I think about when you just said that, I think about the paleo diet, like the Paleolithic, how we used to eat for 12,000 years, right? Grazing, you know, eating grains like the way we used to operate. And we did that until like the last, I don't know, 70 years, 80 years when processed foods, like it's just changed our diets, right? But we're still that human that existed for thousands of years in a certain way, right? And you talk about this from a stress response that our stress response system hasn't updated in 12,000 years. Same, but like the environment's changing at this exponential rate. We all feel it, right? The AI is even basically even more present. It's one thing to, change your skills and change your career, but it's like, it's just coming at us. I mean, what does that gap cost? What is that going to cost us, or what is it costing us now as a species?
So the software problem comes from that, from that evolutionary mismatch in our stress response. So that you could say that the last 12,000 years is a couple of seconds in a 24-hour clock of our evolution. For millions of years, we have evolved, and we have, in our body, it's been created, and certain systems have been made, like our stress response, which was necessary to fight and flight, to run after food, to have food, or to run away from a predator, not to be food, right? And that needed a lot of muscular tension, muscular activity, changes in vascularizations, changes in metabolics, changes in heart rate, breath rate, immune system, the way you react with your brain. So all of that was very good for that time. But today, that same response is being useful. I don't have any internet.
Yeah. Or Netflix has got, the YouTube.
Yeah. So you can see already, so my neck goes in, my shoulders goes up, so my hands go like, oh, so I'm going to that fight and flight response. My psoas tenses up, my heart rate goes up, my breaths changed, my vascularization changes, all of that for I don't have any internet, which is not going to kill me, right? And it's not something that I mean, it's not a survival response is needed for that. And so this evolutionary mismatch describes that this evolutionary trait, like our stress response, is not matched to the demands of today, nor the type of demands, nor the amount of stresses and demands that we have today, because it was meant for short time. Now we are constantly, with all the demands that we have, in the lifestyle that we have, it's constantly being triggered. And that creates ailments, that creates this kind of dysautonomia and dysfunctions. And then we have the tensions, we have the heart problems, we have the digestive problems, we have the irritable bowel syndrome, we get depression, cognitive decline. We have some people get skin allergies and so forth from this. Not all of them, but it's a generalization that we need to discuss, that many of our problems today are related to this evolutionary mismatch in our stress response, because that stress response is itself become a stressor because it's mismatched to the current demands. And
Well,
although it's been written about in science, there is a book about it, Mismatch. It's called it's a Dutch scientist that's written about it, but nobody seems to see what the importance of this is for our health and well-being. And
well, that's
I want to be an advocate of that. I want to say, look, this is a huge problem that we all have, that I'm discussing with my patients, and they all see the sense of that. And I say, I'm working on a solution of this, because we'll need to put this, we need to put this into discussion. I'm not necessarily a scientific researcher, but if I can make this up, if I can see this, Why does not many more people see this?
I think it could be that there is comfort in what they practice, and the desire to push change is not there for a lot of people. I think as a futurist, our kind of natural state is change. Like we look at that, and this is a curve of exponential change culturally, right? It's the biology isn't changing though. So let's put our futurist hats on. Like if we go out 50 years, what happens if we don't address this? What happens if we don't deal with this in a very, very active way?
It might be very strange to say war,
Okay.
war,
War.
war.
Yeah.
Because
So yeah, is this go to the kind of weak men make bad times, bad times. It's make strong men make, good time. It's the kind of cycle, right? It's like you need a
yeah, but
almost a collapse or a situation to kind of shake the system to make us realize what we, you know, have
well,
and to kind of
we
like
feel more
change.
uncomfortable with ourselves. We
Yeah.
feel the more that we go into this stress response because of the stress response, we also get more short sighted. We want the things now. We don't think about later. Our neighbor becomes the enemy because the stress response is all about you and nobody else. And so, we will be less tolerant. We will become also far more greedy and we will become sicker at the same time. Right. And then technology that is exponentially changing. We probably are going to rebel against that because it's taking our jobs and we become far more, how to say, aggressive because stress creates aggression. It doesn't make somebody very love and peacey like. Huh? So
Love and PC. That's good. That's good.
and there will be more diseases and there will be more different diseases, more multimodal diseases, so more complex diseases. Of course, that all of that is in front of us if we don't start to think about solutions, about how to deal with this conflict between biology and culture.
Well, that kind of gives us a kind of bridge into kind of this vision you have of dynamic balance, right? So you coined this term, eustasis.
Yes.
I understand it as good balance through change. So I'm going to let you
Yes.
describe it, and then
Okay.
we kind of explore that, and we'll kind of do some different. I want to get some different framing around it and things you've written about it. But yeah, let's start because that leads into like, okay, what happens? Let's find the balance. So yeah, can you
But
kind of
let's go back to my original story. I said
yeah,
that the first question that I was asked was, "What are you doing here?"
right?
And I said,
Where are you
"With
here?
this,
What is
yeah, and the reason is you here is this conflict that I described with my hands. So this one says this goes like that. So the first thing we have to do is, what's the problem? Okay, we have this problem called an evolutionary mismatch. There is a conflict between biology and culture. And what do you want? Okay, you want that it is matched, right? So that it is in harmony, this biology and culture. And that's when I came up with the word eustasis. EU means good, stasis, as like homeostasis or allostasis is a balance through change. And so you have the good balance through change between biology and culture. So this is what we all want in the future and now, right? Because who doesn't want to have the feeling of this balance between biology and culture, which is also another word of saying doesn't want to be in health and flourish and thrive in a fast changing world. That that is again how my past and my future and the theories I have suddenly become so meaningful and to saying from wow, this is the same process. So now I have instead of a sentence, what do I want the future to be? I have this like vision of the word eustasis on which I now can build what do I need to have eustasis or what it's not about me actually. It's about what do we need? Because it's my future is our future. We are not alone, right?
that's right.
Yeah, like in my book, in my second book, I
Future.
say, change your story, change your why apostrophe.
Right. And everyone's going to experience the future differently. There's different states of that. And I think that's where a lot of scenario work kind of falls. It just talks about reductive generality, but I think in this case, how we have a way to adapt. Like you said, it's about the capacity, uh, you know,
Yeah.
to adapt.
Yeah. So eustasis is your capacity to adapt and manage change no matter which future scenario presents itself.
Yes, and I think for me, the thing that I love about this concept the most is that you don't just talk about the biological, the psychosocial, you bring in the spiritual, which is about meaning and purpose, which I think is so important. I mean, I think a lot of the neuroscience and a lot of it is just pure quant numbers and, it's just the science, right? But it doesn't understand that there's an element of meaning and purpose. And if it's, connection with a higher power, belief systems, right? That that creates balance and health in your life. If, I love that you make sure that that's there because it's a
Yeah. So
fine.
we have the bio, psychosocial, and spiritual. And that spiritual for me is indeed, meaning and purpose, the innate meaning and purpose, your personal, but also your collective meaning and purpose. But also, we have to start thinking about transcendence towards the next generation, for example. And here is another thing about next generational thinking, and because meaning and purpose for oneself, but also the next generation. But for oneself becomes interesting because, for example, I teach in India and many of my students believe in reincarnation. There are many societies, many cultures that believe in reincarnation. But reincarnation, that means for some, it can be anything. But I've spoken to some of my Indian friends and they say no, reincarnation as a human, that means that the next generation might be me.
Yeah, interesting to think about it
And
that way.
if is that
Yeah.
is if we don't know, but so if we don't know what the future is going to bring, and the next generation, if I die, we don't know what is going to happen. If we cannot be sure, then there is a possibility of no, there is no reincarnation, or there is reincarnation. And what if it is? Okay, so then meaning and purpose is also what I think the information that we take with us to that life, because what we know for sure is that all the material world you leave behind. So, what do you take with you is information, experience. And I want to work, and I find that info and experience, that's part of meaning and purpose.
No, you wrote that's great because you wrote this article and I loved reading it. It was called, and I'll have the link in the show notes for people to check it out. It's called Feeling Lost in Paradise. So
Yeah.
you talk about the fast changing technology and this technology driven world, right? But there seems to be a lack of vision for humanity. I'm a protopian person. I believe in
Me too.
the individual. We have our tribalism, our greed, but I think humanity as a species the last few 100,000 years, we're pretty resilient, but we've also had a guiding sense of where to go. So where do you think we're going? What do what scenario are you kind of worried about these days? And then that connects with eustasis. Like, how does that help navigate something like this?
So, again, looking back at that kind of futurize yourself process that I went through,
Mhm.
looking at that, I say from, hey, but this is what we need to do for humanity to work towards that eustasis and to counterbalance the conflict between biology and culture. And suddenly I realized, but we don't have a project human. Where are we going? What do we want? Where do we want to be for as humanity? There is no answer. So at this moment, we are being pushed forward by our biology, and I said this before, into direction unknown, que sera, sera. When tomorrow looked the same as yesterday, that was not so much of a problem. But today, tomorrow doesn't look anything like yesterday. And this becomes a problem because it creates anxiety of the future. So now the thing is that if we start thinking about ourselves in 100 years' time, what would an ideal day be like in 100 years' time? 100 years is a sweet spot because there are people today living, that will be living in 2126, right? And
my son is
if you
8
look,
and yeah, he'll be
yeah, so he probably will live until that age or can has the potential to. But
Mhm.
hey, maybe we too. If you're looking at some of the developments into longevity and health span and lifespan, the developments with billions being invested in that, maybe they found something in the next 10, 20 years that will reverse aging, and then we might even have that chance to live that long. If we want it or not, that's another, and that's something aside. I'm not going to discuss that part, but it means that we need to think about what do we want and what do we need, because we know for sure that the technology is going to evolve exponentially. But here's another thing. Where is that evolution of that technology going? Technology is meant to augment us, it's need to help us. But if we don't know where we are going, how can technology help us if we don't have a direction for ourselves? This was the question I was asking myself into this article, right? So at the moment, I find that technology is developing in so many different directions, and some of them, because we don't have a direction for ourselves, are being created and are creating problems that did not exist before because there is no direction for it. But now, if we can imagine a future, eustasis future with all different elements and make it into a birthright, and then every company and every single government has that as a sort of directive to align to. And there will not be less commerce. No, there will be not less things being sold, but it will have a direction. It will have more meaning and purpose. And so I believe that the economy is then supporting humans' evolution instead of now, today, I find it is more diversifying us into different elements, into even different species, I think.
well, we both come up at this in a similar way, the fraction of our species, right? It's like,
Yeah, that was funny. That was funny when we had that free interview. I said, wow,
yeah.
I didn't know that anybody else had thought about this.
Mine is my kind of overall is like homo machina, but it's like there's species that connect. If we take people that might connect through technology to create a collective consciousness, or people that are modifying their bodies to do long, space travel, or just even the basics of just using CRISPR, right? And you talk about this with if you're integrating that, you're changing the DNA, like, and will that mean just like movies like Gattaca, will we have to change children to deal with that diverse? I worry about the fracturing of humanity.
Yeah, so do I.
Envelope is for yourself. Does what you kind of come out? Well, how do you look at this?
Yeah.
Different from transhumanism.
Well, so I was thinking, okay, so what are we seeing already happening is that some people are trying to evade themselves into the digital world, right? Into the virtual reality world. Let's say that happens, that continues. These are people that are not going outside anymore. They have their virtual world, they have their virtual families, they have their virtual houses and everything like that. So, but that's game over, right? They because if they don't meet somebody and they have children in the real world, no, they have digital children and bring them up. Okay, so that's game over for that species. Then you have the Homo digitalis transhumans. They integrate technology into themselves that is executive. So you have technologies that measure things but don't have any executive function. But here we're talking about executive. So it changes your brain function. All this arm, it's too weak. I'm going to put another arm in it and I'm going to augment my capacities. But the problem with that is that it will change DNA. And so it changes because you're not going to use certain faculties. You're not going to use certain brain functions. These are switched off. So environment and behavior changes epigenetic coding, changes the way a gene is expressed. So that gene expression is changed, and then you have children. But then this exchange gene expression will go to the children who don't have that upgrade. So what will happen to them? And then we have the Gattacus that we probably need to CRISPR them to make them happy or to make them healthy, because I think that might actually be unhealthy children. And so
Pretty slow because we use
that's
that
a
to
very, very, very
children.
slippery slope indeed. So that changed baby, CRISPR, that creates a new human species for me. And then you have the, as you said as well, I called it the Homo australis, the one that goes into space and has babies. Well,
Yeah.
due to the environmental changes, epigenetic changes, DNA changes, maybe that child cannot come back to Earth because it will not be
A
able
lot of people.
to deal with gravity.
That's right. I mean, I've said that on previous shows, and people in the space industry is that everyone is about going to Mars, going to planets, and even, but Venus is actually the best candidate. People don't realize that Venus in its high atmosphere is breathable. And it's also got 1 G of gravity. It's also a closer planet than Mars. But at the same time, it's like, okay, you live there, that's great. Or you go to Mars and you live there and you have a colony, that's great. But if it's one third of the gravity, can you actually conceive? We don't know yet. We've been doing a lot of space research, which kind of leads me to kind of what you want to take some of your research approach into space. And it's going to have massive implications on the things we choose for humanity if we're going to go to the stars, because we might have to modify. We might have to do that, but just like you said, Earth might be too hostile of a planet if we're gonna have to be out there. It's
Yeah.
a wild
And
concept.
and that's, I'm not saying it's not okay. That's okay. You know, if we create a space,
Being aware and just kind of
it's not being aware
exploring it, right?
what it is that we are facing. And because you have the transgensis, this is like, this is a pretty utopian idea, but they're doing it already, because you have these people that have died and now they're putting in cryoreservation. So this means that homo transgensis is where your software it is transported into a digital tool. And so no more this abandonment of the biological body. So that's another species. There you go. And I have Homo evolupsis. And Homo evolupsis is the Homo that it's the process of evolving on purpose. That's what evolupsis stands for. And the evolupsis is the person which I choose to be and am, is the one that evolves on purpose. They say, from this is where I want to go to, and this is where I dedicate my life to. And so the eustasis, so the one that is going to work towards eustasis, and to be able to cope better with change, with the technology. That technology is what technology does, but I will stay human, but I will become the better version of the human that I can become.
Well, if you're taking eustasis and you're managing how humans manage stress here, you've been looking at this in terms of application for space travel, right? You're looking at,
Yes.
like, how does the evolutionary mismatch, what does it look like on a mission to Mars? Like, what is your research approach first? Like, what do you want to explore? And then how would that like work like on a mission to Mars? Like, was
So
like,
let's say that, so the process that I've developed for manual therapy is how to integrate autonomic regulations, so software treatment into the hardware protocol. So that is a manual therapy approach that helps the body to back into autonomic regulation. The best way to describe it is like when a child is in distress, you give it a hug and you rub over the head, and you do on the face, for example, you do it on the arm. But by the way, you never do in the opposite direction, and never do it against the hair. It's always with the hair. And this is very interesting because that is soothing, that is calming effect that neuroscience has shown that. Um, and so when we're using these kind of manual techniques, especially on the head. Remember that it's another example. When you forget a name, you touch here. When you've done something you shouldn't have done, oh, I shouldn't have done that. You grab here. When you have
mm,
tensions, oh, la, 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 la. Why do we do that? Okay, so I discovered that the process that had discovered and that I was doing with my patients, that it was exactly these parts of the head that I was touching. So imagine that we teach astronauts, this kind of self-treatment, so this self-reset,
mhm.
because they're in a very stressful environment, and when there's, when stress takes the overhand, you also change, then your behavior changes. You become less tolerant of the others. There might be some more conflict. You can get a bit depression. So what if we teach astronauts this kind of technique, this the kind of self-treatment, or doing it on another astronaut, because I do it on my patients. Like if you teach astronauts how to do that on each other, and I've already taught lay people this and they can do it. So everybody can do it. So that is an approach that doesn't require any medication until a certain limit. So it doesn't solve all the problems, but maybe it can help them to be more resilient and to stay balanced longer. And also, there is no payload. You teach it, it's an information, and it doesn't cost 10,000s of euros per kilogram to get it into space. So there is a benefit in this for astronauts to learn this. But my first idea was actually for space tourists, because
Yes.
also
Okay.
space tourists are not trained like astronauts. They're not selected like astronauts, and the experience of sitting on on this big cigar that might explode any minute, the fear of that, then experiencing weightlessness and all of that is enormous for in a very very short period of time for something that is definitely creating an evolutionary mismatch, right?
I think about roller coasters. Like when you come to a amusement park, right? You may like roller coaster, you may like, but you look at this thing, you kind of know the layout, but you've never been on it, right? You're looking at this thing and you get on it, and then the sensory overlay of just the drops, the tour, and then once you've done it, it is like, how do you prepare for that, right? And I think of a ride that it's, you know, a rocket is just, a whole nother level. But I think about that, your whole body is trying to absorb the change. You just put yourself through it.
So the initial idea was from, okay, I think that give private astronauts or space tourists, whatever you want to call them, give them a treatment before and after their trip, right? Because definitely before, to make sure that they're in the best optimal kind of relaxed state to go up, so that the experience is also not from a stress point in a lower stress level, and then they come back and then do the treatment again, so that stress experience from a biological level is again neutralized. Because otherwise, what I was seeing as a consequence, if you don't do that, that these are people with a lot of influence, and they have lots of businesses, and they have seen the earth from the overview perspective, and they suddenly see from how precarious our world is, and they probably become more climate activists, as many of the astronauts do. They become advocates of, we need to take care of our planet, and so they can put that into their businesses and so forth. But if they go into their stress response and they don't realize it, they become the egoistic, they become very radical, and it might just destroy all that what could have happened. All of that, these great ideas, this kind of climate conscious people might become completely the opposite and have a bad trip. Look at I can't remember his name as a real Ali, the actor who played Kirk in Star Trek.
William Shatner.
Yeah, he had a bad trip.
So
He's written book about.
he's 92, I
Yeah,
believe.
he went up and had a bad trip. He really, it really affected him very negatively.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I thought he
And straight away that he came down, he had he had this kind of, for me, it was like a man depressed state.
well, it does for many people I've talked to who've done it, who've gone up or been up, the people I've interviewed. There's a sense of excitement, and then there's this sense of smallness and, like, but there's also a lot of, like, resolve and, like, how beautiful this earth is and how unique it is. It definitely has a life-changing experience for many. I can't say all, but it definitely has, the impact. It's interesting you share that. I thought Captain Kirk would have, you know it's Captain Kirk, but still. But I thought he would, but, I give him a lot of credit because at 92, most people, don't even wanna walk down to get the mail. So, I mean, he's got a hell of a lot of energy, and I think as we kind of, cut to get to the end of this, wrapping up this wonderful conversation, things that I like to kind of rapidly go through, just kind of few things to kind of like off the top of your head that I love to get from people. And, um, the thing called the bold future question, like one thing that, okay, if there's one thing you think will be true about human health in 2050, what do you think would most people would call it crazy? Like what would be the thing you think will be true?
If we continue like we're doing now, what I'm seeing today, we will be worse off. We will be more
Less healthy?
less healthy.
Interesting. I don't know, people would call you crazy. Yes. It sounds not, yeah, but the people, you're right. But in a way, a lot of people think everything's progressing and being solved, right? They think AI is going to solve cancer.
But it's a scenario that I want to change. That's why we have this
Absolutely.
conversation. That's why
Absolutely.
we're having this conversation today.
So what keeps you've talked about so many wonderful things. I mean, the everyday, like what makes you, what keeps you inspired? Like, it keeps you going. It keeps you like revved up.
But 2050 still looks bad.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, that keeps me going and say from no, I want to make sure that 2050 looks good. Right. And so,
Yeah.
the reset approach, I've started to teach that very recently because I felt confident in teaching it. I'm 55 today. And so with that age comes also like sort of I want to pass on my knowledge. And now with this 19 years of experience, 25 years in a way as a futurist, now I'm ready to pass this on to the next generations. But also the more people that I train, the more people feel the benefits of that. And you treat one person, but they go home and it has an effect on a family. It has an effect on the next phone call. It has an effect on the business they are doing, on the business relationships they have.
Well, and that leads me to the legacy question. So, say 50 years from now, past the 2050, 2075, when you're looking back at a, a great career, great, I'm not saying this is the end of the road, but like what do you hope people say about your contribution? Like what you did for
For
society,
humanity,
left behind.
I really hope that there is there is a reset approach practitioner in every single community around the world and into space.
Explain that, the reset practitioner, just
So the reset approach is the reset is a return to ease. That's a REASET. So
Mhm.
for health to express itself, we need to be at ease. In ease, that means that we are able to adapt and manage change, and that we can have the stress where we need it and go into relaxation where we need it as well. It's like another way of saying eustasis from on the biological level. And then you still have the
Mhm.
psychological, social, and the spiritual. So, and by today's problems, as we said before, many of today's problems are software have a so this is what we need to bring into balance. First, this is what the reset approach does. It's a full body approach that doesn't only focus on the autonomic nervous system, but also on the central autonomic network, central autonomic nervous system, neuroendocrine, and the immune inflammatory system that we see as a whole. We help it into ease. So we calm the body, and so from then we do the symptom treatment of the patient. And so
That's great.
it's not an alternative, it's not a complementary approach, it's an integrative approach. You integrate it into your manual therapy practice. Or, for example, you integrate it into cancer treatments. You integrate it before and after an operation. To do what? To make those operations, to have that cancer treatment have more success. Because the success depends on the state of the body. If the body is in stress, its immune and inflammatory system doesn't work. The digestion is inhibited. Your heart rate is too high. Your breath rate changes. That changes metabolics. Your vascularization has changes. All of that helps you into healing is actually, has a sort of a short circuit to it. How do you want then that treatment works? It will have an effect. So I'm
It does gonna have an
presenting
effect.
a sort of a system from we do this pre-treatment and then you do your treatment. So you doctor, whatever you do, that your results have more impact, are more effective. because the effectiveness of that medication that you're giving, of the surgery that you're giving, of whatever you do is impacted by the state, the stress state of the body.
That's great. So tell me this. Where can people find you to dive into deeper thoughts of Tom's deeper thoughts?
Deepest thoughts. Okay, you can find me on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the first place where most people find me. But then you have futurizeyourself.com or theresetapproach.com. That's more for therapists and people that are looking for information more about this reset approach, about this way of thinking about manual software approach into manual therapy and other techniques. But Futurize Yourself is where you find the links to my books and all of the futures thinking ideas that I have. So you have the Futurize Yourself. At the moment, I have rewritten that book, and that will come out again like a second edition sometime this year. And then you have the Futures Effect, where I explain how to develop a DNA for your future. So a DNA that we haven't talked about, I think, but it's about stands for that what does not alter but can be expressed in different ways so that you can make a vision for the future for yourself on something that does not alter. And that is my DNA, is that kind of my potential. What do I want to feel? And my aspirations for the rest of my life. I know these elements won't change at all. They express differently, but they don't change.
Great. Tom, thanks for being on the show. Great conversation.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Really appreciate it. Really do.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for listening to the Think Forward podcast. You can find us on all the major podcast platforms and at www.thinkforwardshow.com, as well as on YouTube under Think Forward Show. See you next time.